ZombieTech. Welcome to ZombieTech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Eddie.
He's Whisker.
And who do we have this week?
This week we have Jake Griebe, who is, head instructor and founder and big cheese, not head cheese, big cheese of the School of Wilderness Medicine and Survival. He is a paramedic.
Head cheese might be a class of said school.
What do you mean?
You know, head cheese.
Oh,
Yeah.
Awkward. Ew. Gross. Yes, so he is a paramedic, nurse to be. Woohoo! I'm a nurse too, so woohoo! And former Marine infantry, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And just pretty much you would be our wilderness expert here on the zombie apocalypse team. So welcome. Hello.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. We're happy to have you too. So tell us about, and do you call it SOMAS or is it?
Just SOMAS.
SOMAS.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how did you come up with the idea and what's the history behind the school?
Well, I've kind of had a lifelong interest in just being prepared for emergencies, I guess. Even when I was a kid, I would always try to pretend that I was getting ready for something. Kind of strange, I know. And then throughout my time in the military and then afterwards, it just kind of put me on this path to combine my desire to be ready for things and my love of teaching and medicine and just the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2005, my wife and I started a business that we still do the same thing. We go around to all various areas of primarily Wisconsin and teach for other companies. So if you want your factory staff trained in CPR or first aid, we can go do that. And we've also been teaching wilderness medicine throughout that time too.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, I kind of realized that even though wilderness medicine and wilderness survival are really inseparable, you can't really find any training that combines the two to any large degree. So that's kind of where the idea for the School of Wilderness Medicine and Survival came from, was frustration. I wanted to increase my wilderness medical knowledge, but I wanted to do it in like the worst case scenario type setting, but I couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
And that training might be available to certain people in the military, but not really for the average person.
Sure. So
that's kind of what I'm doing, just combining regular wilderness medicine in the actual, as close to the wilderness as we can get, instead of being in a classroom that's just next to some woods
with a nice slideshow.
Right.
Right.
And so we'll go out into the forest for a couple of days, and just throughout that time, just cover all the things that would normally be covered in a standard wilderness first aid or even wilderness first responder course. But in conjunction with that, people are also taking care of their survival needs. They're building a shelter, they're making fire, and using those skills in the medical context as well. So hypothermia is really the best example. If you go to a regular wilderness medicine class, they'll tell you about hypothermia, how to recognize it, and what needs to be done to treat it. But if you ask them, well, okay, how do I build a shelter? Mm-hmm. They'll likely tell you, go to a survival class. So
that's kind of inefficient. You might as well just do it all at once.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I think the reason that it isn't done that way more often is the skill sets between the two two disciplines don't really develop alongside each other. You kind of have to diverge. Wilderness medicine is very much just an extension of regular medicine. What you do for a dislocated kneecap on top of a mountain isn't much different than what you do for it in an ER.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the context.
Sure.
So people that teach wilderness medicine are usually just healthcare providers, and they may or may not have any real outdoor skills.
Okay. So then, how often do you hold these classes, and what kind of people go to them?
Well, mostly what I've been doing for the last several years is doing them kind of by contract. And so I do a lot of training for government agencies like the DNR in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So a lot of people work in jobs where they have to spend a lot of time outside. But what I'm doing now is kind of opening it up, and I'm going to be holding some open enrollment classes here pretty soon, and that's why I have the new website and things like that. I'd never really advertised before, so a lot of this is kind of new. My first podcast, first time Skyping. All that stuff.
You're doing a fantastic job. So
thank you. I'm very, very nervous.
Oh no! Hey, take a deep breath. What would you tell yourself if you're in a wild
you can
setting?
Handle being thrown into the woods for a week. I think you can handle a podcast.
I just don't want to.
We don't bite.
Sound like this is the first time I've used a computer or something.
No. We don't bite unless we're zombified. We're totally safe.
Then we'll chew your face off.
Right. In that event. So I'm actually, I'm a nurse, and you're a nurse to be, woohoo, and a paramedic. So I'm really quite fascinated by the medical portion of your classes. What do you cover?
Well, there's let me step back for a second. With wilderness survival, there is no standard curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
There's no overseeing body that says that this is what's required for you to teach or in a class.
Mm-hmm.
There's really not a standardized way to become a survival instructor. I tell people in all of my classes, you eventually just start telling people that you're a survival instructor, and that's how you become one. That's really it. You just I have the person in the front row. I just tell them, say I'm a wilderness survival instructor, and then
there you are.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly. I say, hey, me too. So, but there is regulation on the medical side of things.
Okay.
So there is a fairly standardized curriculum for wilderness first aid, wilderness first responder, wilderness EMT. So that kind of influences what's covered, and then depending on the level of training. The same things are usually covered, just we'll go more in depth. So for wilderness first aid, we'll talk about bleeding control. And so direct pressure dressings, use of tourniquets, but then we'll deviate from a standard kind of medical context, and we'll talk about how to make a tourniquet. We kind of reverse engineer what a tourniquet is from one of the commercially produced ones, like the CAT, a combat application tourniquet. So we take a look at that, and people get to see, okay, how is this thing built? And then they learn, it's not as simple as just tying a bootlace around someone's arm. That's going to cause a lot of problems.
Right.
And in the class, what I actually do, and some people give me a hard time for this, other instructors, and probably not the greatest idea, but I actually put a tourniquet on my arm, and I have someone tighten it down until you can't feel my radial pulse.
Oh my gosh.
And then I keep giving the lecture. And the people get to see that tourniquets aren't as dangerous as we used to think, so long as they're the purpose-made, commercial is. And then they get to see how the skin color changes and all that, and how when they release it, my arm turns all red, and
right.
They get a kick out of it. But
right.
So that's kind of the difference. We go from standard stuff, and then we go to improvised care, what to do in an extended contact time. We cover, the main differences. The length of time you're going to be caring for somebody, lack of communications, being in a resource poor environment where you're not going to have a whole cart full of resuscitation supplies. You're going to have whatever you've got with you and whatever you can improvise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So splinting, people don't carry around big
big boards.
Right, yeah, big boards or pro splints or foam splints. If they're lucky, they have a SAM splint,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of my favorite things. So we talk about how to use tree branches to splint various injuries, or pieces of tent poles, or canoe paddles. All these different things just to improvise.
And have you had any of your classmates isn't the right word, students, have you had any of your students come back and tell you, oh yeah, this guy broke his leg and I totally had to use my canoe paddle? Have they come back with stories and such?
Yeah, sometimes they do. Yeah, I guess it's a good thing that I don't hear a lot of stories.
Right.
I think just knowing the solutions to all these problems makes you more aware of the problems and makes you less prone to have these problems.
Oh, absolutely. That's
true.
a big part of it, is avoiding situations
Right.
where this is going to happen.
Right.
But I do occasionally get an email about how someone had to use the training. I got one not too long ago from a warden here in Wisconsin about how there's a guy who cut his hand severely on a trolling motor.
Oof.
And they were miles and miles out away from any sort of hospital, so they had to irrigate the wound and control the bleeding and do all that like we had practiced in class. And I like to use a lot of fake blood and collage, and most of the time people think it's pretty cool. Or I start spraying the fake blood all over the place. and if when they're holding pressure, if they let go, then I just squirt a whole bunch more on there. And
That's
so
awesome.
I'd like to see your tax form for your business. The business expenses that you're listing here are very... That must
Fake
look interesting
blood.
on a tax form, yeah.
Well, the fake blood is mostly made out of dish soap, at least the recipe that I use.
Ah, okay.
So it's the actual stuff you can buy from companies like Simulades that sell it. That stuff will stain.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So I tried to come up with something that was
Washable.
friendly or as far as getting rid of it.
Sure.
So it's mostly dish soap. There's red dish soap. It's already pre-red, and then a couple of drops of food coloring, and then some cornstarch as thickener.
Yeah.
And you can make it arterial or venous or whatever you need.
That's awesome. So you were referring to like different levels of courses, and from your website I got that you have basic, advanced, and cold weather training. So what do each of those cover? And
that's the kind of standalone, just survival.
Okay.
Survival. Kind of what I do most of the time is what I call just survival medicine levels 1 through 4. And really I just had to kind of invent a name for it.
Sure.
And that was, I guess that was the best I could come up with as far as what is this about.
Yep.
So we're in Minnesota. You're over in Wisconsin, you said?
Yep.
So cold weather training, that's just like getting anywhere in the wintertime up here.
Yeah. So, okay. So cold weather. That would be primarily about recognizing, avoiding, and taking care of hypothermia. Now, that's going to be the thing that kills you fastest in the winter.
Sure.
So how to test your, simple things you can do to test yourself, and things that you can look at for in other people to determine, hey, this person is becoming hypothermic. Then strategies to prevent it, and then what to do if it's actually happening. So then we go into how is heat lost or gained? Conduction, convection, evaporation, radiation, all those things, and how to influence those factors.
Mm-hmm.
So building a shelter. Basically, how do you change the environment or the microclimate around the person so that they're no longer losing as much heat? And then how do you add heat into that system?
Mm-hmm.
You make fire. You make sure the person's able to shiver effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And you get in there with them, things like that. Although I will say that the old idea about skin to skin contact, getting the sleeping bag with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of been disproven
Oh,
to
interesting.
actually raise a person's body temperature. It might help prevent some heat loss, but it really isn't advocated all that.
So, folks, keep your clothes on.
Right. If anyone tries to put that on you while you're camping, just tell them the research does not support it.
Excuse me. Sorry. No, research does not support this. Put your clothes back on. Got it. And then I'm trying to think, so say this is quasi wilderness, quasi not. Say like your truck breaks down, right? In the middle of godforsaken country road 40 or whatever.
Sure.
Right? You don't really, cell phone doesn't work out there. And it'll probably be hours before anyone's going to find you.
Okay.
What's the best thing to do?
Well, I mean, it's going to vary by what your situation is.
Feel free to add questions. I can make up details all day.
Okay.
Is this like a cold weather thing?
Yeah, cold weather.
I see.
So, I mean, I guess the first thing to really talk about is that the wilderness exists. It can exist anywhere. It's it's a context more than a location.
10 feet out of your comfort zone, wilderness exists.
Sure. In the medical on the medical side of things, the wilderness, as defined really by the Wilderness Medical Society, just means that you're more than 1 hour away from definitive medical care.
Oh, wow.
So in the middle of the night on some road where there are no street lights and no one knows where you're at, you might as well be floating on a life raft in the middle of the ocean at that. So that can be the wilderness just the same as anything.
Sure.
Well, if you're ever in a situation like that, you need to first, try to be calm.
Yep.
And resist the urge to panic and just run out of wherever you're at.
Right.
Yeah. When people start running around, it becomes more difficult to find them, and especially in a cold environment, you're exposing yourself to the lower temperatures and things like that. So, just sit tight.
Right.
If you're going somewhere, someone is gonna miss you when you don't show up.
Right.
You're able to control the temperature inside of the vehicle much easier than if you just start walking down the road and you don't know where you're going. You become hypothermic, your brain isn't functioning as well as it should, and a lot of bad things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of vehicle are we in?
Gosh, I don't know. 1939 Ford pickup truck, because that's my favorite. I love them.
39. Okay.
They're very cute.
Okay, so that's a small cab.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you were in a car and you had properly prepared, you might have some plastic sheeting or something in there. In which case, you could compartmentalize the front or the back seat, so that's even an even smaller amount of space. So it makes it again easy to keep the heat in. Sure.
Right.
So you're in a small area. What you want to do is, again, try to limit heat loss by conduction, convection, all those things, and then encourage heat gain primarily through shivering.
Okay.
So you want to insulate yourself. You don't lean up against any of the surfaces that are facing the outside. So don't lean up against the door or the window or anything like that. Stay away try not to lean on anything made of metal. Those are going to conduct heat away from you faster. Put whatever you can to create airspace around you. So multiple layers of clothes. If you got a blanket or something, wrap that around yourself. Make sure in particular that your head and your neck and your wrists are covered, since you lose a lot of heat through those areas, since they've got all those blood vessels really close to the surface of the skin.
Sure.
So just do that. If you've got a survival blanket or a space blanket, most people call them, you definitely want to wrap that around you. That's going to reflect a lot of the radiant heat that you're losing. And if you have something to eat, make sure you eat that. Those calories are going to help you shiver more effectively for a longer amount of time.
So let me ask then. Say you've got like a package of M&M peanuts, and I always think about this for some odd reason. You got a package of M&M peanuts. Do you save them? Like go one at a time very slowly, or do you like down them? Half like when you first freak out, and then half like the next day.
Well, you don't do anything while you freak out.
Okay.
If you freak out, just devote all your. Don't make any decisions. Just continue freaking out until
you finish that. Okay.
Right, and then worry about other things.
Okay.
It's going to really depend on how long
it goes for.
Right.
Sure.
So in a short-term situation, it really wouldn't matter if you ate them all right away or just ate a handful at a time. And this is one of the common misconceptions that people have about survival, is that they're going to starve to death. That's really the
last thing.
Things that's going to happen in terms of what's going to kill you or not. Most people can survive pretty easily without food for a couple of weeks. So really, that would just what you're eating that for in a cold weather situation is just to make sure you have quick calories available so that you can shiver. Since shivering takes a lot of energy, but it's really one of the only active ways you can generate heat while you're sitting still. Aside from that, you can try to move around. That's going to generate some heat, since about 40% or 60% of energy created in the human body is lost in the form of heat.
Okay.
So movement, things like that.
Gotcha. Now,
do some sit-ups or something in the cab of the truck.
Right. So let's assume next day we're rescued.
I've got an idea.
What?
So just to bounce it off of Jake here. So my natural inclination in a situation like this would be to do something like hop out. Okay, I've blown my heat barrier on the inside. I'm outside.
Good job,
okay,
Whisker.
we're back to zero. Get under the hood, pull out the battery, bring it in the cab with me. The under the hood's a freaking hardware store. It's not a very good hardware store in a 39, but it's simple enough. You can grab some wires off there, stuff like that. And then I would probably, if we're talking like a blizzard, right?
Yeah.
So I would probably bury the cab. Give myself a lot more insulation than I would have had.
Really?
Yeah, and I'd build up some body heat while I was doing the work. But then you got to get inside and you got to get dry, and you need to have a nice source of heat in there with you. And I can use the battery to generate heat because I'm just that kind of person.
But how are you going to do that?
There's 100 different ways to do that. You got a lot of juice there.
Okay. I guess
That's
it would
hardcore.
it seemed to me that the plan, it would take a lot of effort, a lot of physical effort to bury the cab of especially a truck.
Well, she said it was a country road, and they're only ever like blizzarded in for 24 hours, 48 hours tops. So I'm not too worried about the long term before a plow's going to come by.
Sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'd be worried about like a week. But then
I've never known a road to close
my M&M peanuts
for a week long up here. It just doesn't really happen.
That's true. We're pretty hardcore about getting rid of snow.
I think trying to bury the cab of the truck, I think that
too much energy.
I think so, and you'd probably start sweating.
Yeah.
In which case it's gonna cause a lot of more evaporative heat loss.
Oh yeah.
Your clothes are gonna get wet. That's gonna cause conductive and more convective heat loss. And that's a lot of people don't realize that is that sweating in cold weather is really a bad
Bad
thing.
idea.
Yeah. That's why I mentioned that I had to stay dry. So,
Sure.
yeah, I would try not to sweat if I were going to be doing something like that. But it's very easy when you're bundled up working outside to get sweaty.
That's true.
But of course, I'm a Michigander, so I can run around barefoot in a blizzard and not even feel it. So,
And always remember that cotton and
wicks.
cotton fabric is not, well, no, it's not your friend
Mm.
in the cold weather.
Mm.
It doesn't really wick. Well, it wicks the water up into the fabric, but it can become saturated pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It takes forever to dry.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of search and rescue groups will actually refer to cotton as the death cloth.
Oh my gosh.
That. So yeah, that's really, really bad in terms of staying warm. If your base layer is made of cotton.
Mm. So then what would you recommend? Like wool?
Yeah, wool is going to be better.
Going the way of
Synthetic
sheep.
fabrics like polypro,
Okay.
things like that. Technical fabrics are usually best for base layers.
Sure. So then what other common misconceptions do people have when it comes to wilderness survival?
Besides that they're going to starve in
Right.
3 days,
Right.
I think one of them is that if you put the term survival training in front of it, you have to do everything in the most difficult and disgusting way possible.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
times people ask, well, okay, so let's say it's a prolonged survival situation. But what do I eat? And we just usually say, well, bugs. Eat bugs. And they're a readily available source of protein most of the time. Easier to identify than a lot of edible plants unless you got considerable experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then people don't even think about the possibility of trying to cook the things. They just think they're going to eat them. Yes, like an episode of what was that Fear Factor?
Yeah.
So
Ugh.
they'll ask with this kind of look on their face, well, could I cook them? Like, yes, absolutely. Why wouldn't you cook them? So that's one, and I think another one is that this sort of education is only for people who are ex-military
Mm.
or think that the world is going to end,
Mhm.
or just hardcore wing nuts.
Right.
It's really not. The skills you learn are gonna primarily what I want to do is make people feel more confident and comfortable when they're outdoors, camping, fishing, hunting, whatever, so that they can enjoy themselves more and they can really participate in nature
Sure.
instead of being a tourist, I guess.
Sure. And it's at least knowing that you have the resource and somewhat not like some basic knowledge in case something should happen. That way you're not completely flat on your butt when someone gets a cut or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. And then so say we're going hiking, it should be like a 1-day trip, no biggie, right?
Okay.
What are some basic supplies that people should consider taking with them?
Well, before you pack any supplies, you should be making sure that people know where you're going.
Yep.
And that you've told them, hey, if I'm not back by X day, we're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you're leaving a trail as far as where you're going, when you're supposed to be there, when you're supposed to be back, what you're going to be doing, how many people, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let people know before you leave. Make sure if you're parking somewhere, put a little note on the front seat. If you get lost and they start looking around, they'll find your car at some point if it's in a parking lot or on the roadside.
Mm-hmm.
And if they look in there, they'll be able to hopefully be better able to find you.
Okay.
So that's
leave
number one. Make
a
sure
trail.
leave a trail. Make sure
Mhm.
people know where you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you want to bring? Well, as far as medical and survival gear, a survival kit is kind of a personal thing. So I'm not gonna. There is no set list as far as what needs to be in there. It's really going to be influenced by a lot of things. What are your concerns? People will pack a survival kit based on what they're worried about. I have a lot of stuff in mind to make fire. Multiple redundancies as far as that goes, because I'm worried about hypothermia. It's going to be influenced by what training you have, or what you've seen on YouTube or things like that. So there's really no set list, but there are 7 survival priorities. This is the list that I learned, a long time ago, and this is the list that I use to teach other people. So there's 7 things. Number 1 and number 7 really never change position, but 2 through 6, I like to think of them as being on a sliding scale.
Sure.
So number 1, always is going to be your attitude. You got to have a positive mental attitude to survive. Over and over again, we see situations where the person that survives this horrendous event might not be the person with the most equipment or training, or in the best physical shape. It's the person that just refused to give up. So never give up. Always maintain a positive mental attitude. So that's always number 1. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter what you're carrying in your pack or who's with you or anything like that. Number 2 is that priority is wilderness first aid. So just have something. It doesn't have to be the most expensive medical kit, but make sure you're able to stop bleeding. Make sure you're able to treat shock and hypothermia. Make sure that you have some equipment to treat less severe stuff, Band-Aids, ibuprofen, things like that. Adventure medical kits. They're a company that makes I think they're really the best off the rack wilderness medical kits out there. So
cool.
And the stuff that they sell, it's kind of separated by how many people are in your group versus how many days you're going to be out versus what the activity you're performing is. So if you're going to be on a river for a week and you've got 3 people in your group, they've got a kit that's already packaged for that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very handy. So
that's number 2. Number 3, shelter.
Okay.
Make sure you've got something. It could be a tent, poncho, something to separate you from the environment. In a lot of the classes that I teach, we just use painter's drop cloths, an 8x10 piece of 2 or 3 mil plastic, and you can make many different types of shelters out of just that. We use parachute cord because it's got a million uses, but just string and a drop cloth would be a really, really inexpensive shelter to carry around with you if you knew what to do with it.
Sure. Picnic blanket on the one hand, shelter on the other.
The mortgage payment is low on those too.
Right. Okay, sorry. Go ahead and continue.
Number 4 is water. So even sitting still, just through respiration and things like that, you're losing water, which is why water is always a much higher priority than food. I think it's around a liter of water per day is lost just through normal processes, and that's not sweating. That's not if you get ill and you have vomiting or anything like that. So water is always going to be more important. Most of the time we say you can survive around 3 days without water, but before you get to that 72-hour mark, dehydration is going to affect you. So it's not just you get 72 hours and then you fall over dead.
First you get a little loopy, then you get a little loopier.
Right.
Yep.
So water is always something you want to have with you.
Right.
Or at least a means to clean water that you find. So a purification system, filter, whatever you got. With that being said, most survival situations don't last more than 72 hours. And the incubation period for most waterborne illnesses like cryptosporidium and giardia are much longer than that. They're around a week before you start to see symptoms. So if you know you're going to be rescued, it would be much better to just drink water that's contaminated.
Get antibiotics after the fact.
Right.
And then, yeah. Okay.
And then it would be to just not drink anything.
Sure.
So carry water, or at least a means to purify water and carry it. Number 5, signaling. So how do you call help?
Yep.
And then cell phone, or kind of more primitive means, just by carrying a whistle, signal mirror. Those are kind of the standard survival kit stuff. Or, they can get pretty high tech these days with personal locator beacons. You can sign up for like subscription services for companies like Spot GPS. So you just carry this thing with you, and you hit a button, and it sends a signal to a satellite, which relays it to a call center, and so they know, hey, something's wrong. They can pinpoint your location. They send that information out to the rescue team.
Interesting.
And then number 6, fire, just a means to add heat into the system when you're cold. But more than that, creating fire gives you a sense of control over your environment. You can use it to cook, to dry your clothes, to boil water. It has obviously a lot of different uses.
Right.
And number 7, food.
Okay. So food will always remain last.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That doesn't mean you don't have to. Keep putting those bags of peanut M&Ms in there.
Got it. And have you ever had to use your skills before? Like, specifically wilderness survival and training and all that?
Well, absolutely, but I don't think in the way that you're saying. I've never been in a situation where I've been lost. That I would have died had I not been able to do X, Y, or Z. But I use the skills all the time.
Yeah, it sounds like he does it on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I guess, yeah. So no emergency situations, but whenever you're taking a class out and all that, then of course you have to use your skills.
Sure.
Right.
And I go camping a lot with my family, and so I have 2 sons, so I show them a lot of stuff.
Sure.
I use it all the time, and just because you call them survival skills, it doesn't mean that you would only use them in a situation where your life is on the line.
Sure.
Knowing how to make a cooking basket out of green tree branches, and roasting some crayfish over a fire.
Right.
That's a lot of fun. And
you've done it?
Oh, absolutely.
That's cool.
So, it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you're teaching here is very much immediate based stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we've talked about previously on the show is more rebuilding a safety net of society sort of stuff. And so like our survival kit involves things like solar panels and inverters and banks of batteries and maybe
welding
600 555 timers and welding rig, that sort of thing. That's usually what we're worried about, but there's really no point in having any of that if you can't make it through the first 72 hours
at least.
And that's really nasty part in terms of a zombie sort of thing where
people trying to gnaw your face off and everything.
Absolutely.
Especially if we're going with sort of a biological, reality based zombie, because the initial infection is, it exponentially increases across the population. But then they're going to run down in their energy level. So this is going to be like, a week long event, and then they're just basically going to be sitting there, going, until they run out of juice, right? So that first week is extremely important. And basically, my idea is just stay inside and away from all humans for that week. But if you happen to be out on a road trip or something when that happened, then this sort of thing would be very, very important to know.
Yeah.
Well, and these skills are useful not only in an outdoor setting, but if you're talking about the collapse of the the power grid and all those things, you're going to have to stay warm somehow, and being able to start a fire without a lighter is going to become a useful thing to know. So even if you're not out in the woods, knowing how to make sure water is safe to drink, knowing about medical care without the ability to get a person to a hospital, those are all still really important things. Yeah, if you want to survive the initial outbreak of the zombie apocalypse, I think these skills would be pretty handy.
Well,
There's a reason why we call it wilderness instead of like the forest or the woods. Wild has more to do with whether or not it's civilized, right?
Sure.
So the wilderness is any sort of situation where the safety net of society and civilization are gone, and it's basically just you and nature that are left.
Right.
Right.
And I think it's interesting. I mean, that's why the medical portion of this interests me, because I would love to know about the medicinal benefits of plants, or even learn how to make penicillin myself, because I think we're screwed. I mean, where are these zombies going to go when they first realize there's something wrong? They're going to go to the hospital, right? And then they're going to infect the ER people, right? And then they're going to learn how to use the elevators, come up to my floor, eat all of our nurses and whatnot, so the hospital's screwed, right? Tons of resources. And then the pharmaceuticals, well, I don't exactly know how we're going to get our medications from the pharmaceuticals, if antibiotics or whatever for cuts and things like that. So being able to know how to do some of those things by ourselves, I think, is super useful.
Yeah, the unfortunate reality though is that you can't just whip up a batch of penicillin that easily.
God darn it!
So, yeah, it's going to be prevention and just staying healthy to begin with.
Yep.
And just relying on the natural processes of the human body to fight off infection, because there's going to be a limited amount of those resources left.
Sure.
And eventually, even if they're not used, they'll expire and may or may not work.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're serious about, surviving in a situation where things like penicillin would be very important, but you won't have them, one good trick to know is don't ever take antibiotics unless you absolutely have to, because then you'll end up with the immune system of a junkyard dog.
What do you mean?
Well, the more things you get, your immune system gets more and more signatures, for different types of things.
Oh, so
the more things you get hit with, right? So if you attack everything in your life with disinfectants and antibiotics and all this sort of thing, then you're not allowing your immune system to ever be exposed to anything. So you basically are, a soft shell walking around, and instead of a junkyard dog who's had every single type of infection and worm known to, modern science, and is basically still kicking and alive. He's got 3 legs, 1 eye left, but he's still there and he's still alive,
I would stay away from the worms.
Yeah, don't get worms on purpose. That's because you're not going to build up an immunity to them.
Oh, gross. I just see this image of worms. Oh, okay. I mean, I could talk this to a nurse all day long, but I don't know. General populace might not want to.
So I'm just saying, for those hardcore people out there that, want to make sure that they have the built-in human drugstore inside of the body, that's the only way that can happen is for your immune system to be tickled with the baddies enough.
Yeah, every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
So since we are talking about zombies, and since we are talking about survival and such, You actually have this wicked cool zombie-themed charity project that you're working on. Can you tell us about it? And yeah, tell us about it.
Absolutely. It's kind of it's an idea that I came up with when I was just thinking about what would be something that I would want to do. If I was gonna have a crazy experience, what would I what would I want to do? And I've always been a lifelong fan of the whole zombie genre. So obviously there's no way to really experience that until it happens, of course.
Right.
Which we all know it will.
Of course.
So my my goal is to simulate that for a small group of people and have it structured kind of like a movie where you'd show up for this course, and at its heart it's still a training program where you learn wilderness medicine and survival skills, and I throw in a little escape and evasion training in there. So you'd work through. I have them organized as scenes, like in a movie. And so certain things will happen in a given scene, and there's also a lesson plan that corresponds with it. So the example that I'm using, because it doesn't give too much away, is your group, when you're moving from one area to another, you find this campsite in the woods. And there's a fire there, but it's not actively burning, but there's smoke coming from it. There's a little tent. Someone's clearly been here, but they're gone now. There's usable stuff there, and so you have to deal with the moral aspect of it. Do you take this stuff because it will help you survive? You don't know if the person is become a zombie, or they're just
off foraging or something,
or taking a dump or something.
Yeah.
So you don't know, and so then the lesson plan for that scene would be how to look for signs that a person has been there, and what direction they left from, trail cutting, a little bit of basic tracking. And then if the decision is made to take some of the stuff, what is going to give you the most bang for your buck, how to prioritize what you're going to bring with.
Sure.
So that's kind of how it's structured. So again, at its heart, it's still just learning wilderness medicine and survival, but then I throw in live action
zombies,
right,
which is totally awesome.
And I've been learning more about creating latex wounds, so I can do my custom wounds.
Sure.
Things like that. And
is it like volunteers who are going to be helping you be those zombies, or?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Really, the logistics of this thing have become pretty complex, so I think it's going to actually happen next year instead of this year, unfortunately.
Okay.
Because I needed a very specific property to hold it on that had the right mix of just open space and woods and things like that, plus cabins just out in the middle of nowhere and stuff like that. So it's I have a whole year now to really plan it, so it's just going to get bigger. I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
very cool.
Yeah, but I'm hoping that people will volunteer to do it, since it's going to be for charity.
Oh yeah. I mean, I need like the zombie walkers and stuff. Do you know those people? Like people who do zombie walks?
Blood drives,
yeah.
Yep.
Like I don't even know how you would do it. Maybe send it like an article to the local newspaper.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to do. But oddly enough, and we talked a little bit about this before the podcast, the people that are most into the zombies, they're the ones that have the hardest time getting past the idea that you can't shoot the zombies.
Which is just ridiculous. It's people in makeup,
right,
grunting.
Yeah. And that's the way I answer. Why can't we shoot them? Well, because they're not real zombies. They're people who are volunteering for a charity event, and they don't want you to punch them.
Oh, how do they react? Like, have any of them replied with, "Oh,
Well,
I guess so."
one person said, "Well, I wouldn't pay money for that sort of class."
What?
Yeah.
That's
So,
lame. That's
yeah,
kind of scary and totally lame. Wow.
It's okay to have fun and focus on the weapons and how to kill zombies, but it's also important to focus on the other aspects of the question. It's such
The
a
morality.
useful
Yeah.
and dynamic metaphor for
Mhm.
a lot of different things. So,
Mhm.
there's a lot more to talk about than just, how to aim and shoot somebody in the head.
right.
Yeah,
And
so here
you-
we're talking more about using the first couple of, do you say days or hours?
the course is going to run approximately 24 to 30 hours straight.
Mm.
So it's full immersion. So for that day, you're
Zombie
out there.
meat.
Right.
Got
Yeah.
it.
You start out and I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but you start out at a certain point, and bam, you're right smack in the middle of the zombie outbreak. So you got to evacuate, and then you're moving from point A to point B to point C. Um, and there are different things happening. There are basically everyone has a character. As the instructor, I'm there to kind of guide the group through the situations and make sure nothing dangerous happens, and to provide the actual training.
Mm-hmm.
So I play a character within the story. The zombies, some of them are more prominent than others. There's one zombie character that I call Smiley, who shows up, on different occasions.
Nice.
And there are different, non-student but non-zombie characters too.
Oh man. You know what? I know a lot of people must be telling you things you should do, but you should totally do this. You should totally make it so that Smiley actually takes some of the students away. Like pretend students, have a few
Sure.
like
Yeah, we've
oh,
discussed
man.
the idea of having
Plants?
like a plant.
Yeah.
That's fun.
That would be awesome.
So all you out there, if you start life having extra batteries for the flashlight next to your bed as a kid so that you can be prepared for the monster under your bed or in your closet, you too can have a career in which you plant people in the student group to become zombies. Yes.
That is such a brilliant idea. And I sincerely hope you guys somehow videotape like a portion of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is going to happen.
Oh.
There will be video.
Oh, that's just
Of it.
so epic.
Awesome. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, and there's a couple of questions that we like
I
to
know.
ask
These are the real ZombieTech
every guest.
interview questions.
Oh,
The previous was just a warm up. So top 3 tools you would bring to a zombie apocalypse bunker.
Okay, top 3 tools.
You're used
Yeah.
to having 7, down to 3.
Okay.
Yep.
Top 3 tools: water filter,
Okay.
a fire steel.
What's a fire steel?
Fire steel is a ferrocerium metal rod that you can scrape with any metal that's harder with it to create sparks.
Oh, I see.
And then I would, if I could only bring one other thing, it would be my SOG Special Operations Group brand Tactical Tomahawk,
Wow.
because that has,
Hardcore.
I think, the most zombie killing utility of anything that I've got.
Can also help you build a shelter and any number of things.
Absolutely.
So,
True.
yeah.
True. Excellent.
Multi-purpose.
SOG. I like that.
I like that he chose water filter because that's one that I definitely approve of when people say that one, because that's absolutely very, very
Necessary.
important.
Yep. Can water filters filter salt water like an ocean?
Mm-mm.
No, you need,
man.
they do make special desalinization equipment, but other than that, you really gotta just distill it.
I see. Okay. Okay.
I was asked one time if you could give yourself enemas with salt water, if that would kind of not be as dangerous, if you could survive by doing that.
Were they a Californian or something?
No. This was right here in Wisconsin.
Wait a minute. Why would you give yourself a saltwater enema?
Somebody saw someone do that on TV, on one of those survival TV shows.
What is that supposed to do?
Well, you
Clear you
absorb
out?
some water, you know.
Right? Yeah, you're going to absorb the water through your large intestines, and
the
but
large
you're also going to absorb
intestines.
the salt.
Yeah.
It
And
ends
then
up
so you'll
making
end
you
up being more
think-
thirsty.
Right. It still dehydrates you, just like as if you were to drink it. So, and it's a lot less comfortable.
You don't say.
Unless you're Californian,
you'll
and
be
then you're probably
regular.
fine with it.
At least you'll stay regular.
Strange.
No
people.
need for fiber. Oh my gosh. Okay. And then the book you would bring to your zombie apocalypse bunker.
The book
Yeah.
that I would bring.
Yep.
Okay, if it happened right now,
Yep.
it would probably be Mosby's Guide to Nursing Diagnosis.
Really?
Well, that's the one I'm studying right now. So,
Oh man, you won't use it.
I know that, and everyone I've spoken to has told me that, but it's a vital part of what I have to get through right now. So,
I see. Okay, so it's
the care plans and all that.
oh gosh, you won't use it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's very exciting. Okay, so in terms of websites and things that we can find your information on, what are they?
Well, the website for the school, and it's not a school in a formal sense. We don't have a building or a classroom. The classroom is just wherever we're at.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just SOWMAS.com.
Okay.
And then we're also on Facebook,
Yep.
which,
And Twitter, I believe.
yeah, I avoided it for years and years until now I have to do that.
Well, I mean, your tweets seem very interesting, and I'm going to go through and read all the articles and such. So you're doing a fantabulous job so far.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
We didn't get through all the questions, huh?
No.
We never do. We always
Yeah.
have more questions.
And that's okay.
So when is your NCLEX? How farther do you have to go?
Well, I'm the program I'm in is kind of unique. I don't know if you've heard of it, the Excelsior College program. It allows people with clinical experience already, basically paramedics,
Mhm.
LPNs, things like that, to kind of do it self-paced.
Oh, okay.
So about 90% done,
Awesome.
and so I should be done by the end of the year.
Awesome. And is it for like RN
Yeah.
or is it BSN?
Just RN.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember when Addie went through
Oh.
that last few steps of the process there right before the test, and she got more and more
The NCLEX was the
crazy and crazier as it got closer and closer. And then she took the test, and then it took forever for them to get back
I thought for sure I
with-
had failed.
with
for
the
sure.
passing. Of course, she got an excellent score.
Yeah.
But when
Well,
she
pass.
got her score back, she was on the phone with me, and she just started screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming.
And Whisker was like, okay, whoa, inside voice.
Yeah.
What's going on? I'm like, I actually did it. Because everybody always leaves the NCLEX feeling like they just completely bombed the test. Well, from what I understand. And I sure did. But you'll be fine.
I hope so.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you
Yes.
for joining us, Jake. And thank you for listening, everyone out there. You can find this show every Thursday evening at ZombieTech.tv. There's an RSS feed there. You can subscribe with your phone or your music player, iTunes, whatever. And we'll be back next week. Until then, bye.
Bye.
Bye.